My name is Susie from Kentucky, and I've been looking in the Tanakh, and I cannot find where Jesus ascended to the Father before he told Thomas to put his hand in his side and his hands, but he wouldn't let Mary touch him because he said he hadn't ascended to the Father, but then he turned around and told Thomas to touch him. Just wondering if I'm overlooking something, if he ascended and then come back and told Thomas to stick his hand in his side and hand. I'll be waiting for a reply to my question. Thank you, and have a blessed day.
Yeah, it's a very intriguing question. I didn't think you were going to ask that question. I thought you were going to ask the question about touching Jesus, comparing Matthew and John, because in Matthew 28, verse 9, the women are able to touch Jesus and they grab him and worship him. But in John's resurrection account, which is very different than Matthew, it's just so dramatically different, it's shocking. But in John chapter 20, Mary Magdalene alone is at the tomb. Very different. You don't have the two women as in Matthew. That's not important. What is critical is when she discovers that the gardener, or who she thought the gardener was really Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Do not touch me, don't cling to me, don't hold on to me, because that I did not ascend to my Father. Tell everybody else that I am going to your Father, to my God, and to your God." So, A, that's very, very different. And B, we have there in John, in this early stage, we have Jesus saying that the God of Mary Magdalene, is the God of Jesus. That means Jesus is definitely not God, okay? But you took this from a completely different angle, and that is you went to the end of chapter 20. We were introduced to a brand new pericope, a brand new module, a brand new segment in John. And there we have the story of Doubting Thomas. Now, the Doubting Thomas story is unique to the book of John. And the purpose of this story, where Thomas was not around initially when people met Jesus, and he says, unless I see and feel, only then I'll believe. So he was able to touch Jesus, and then he said, "My Lord, my God," which is very intriguing. And then Jesus says, "Blessed is those who haven't seen, who haven't touched and believe." Okay, so that's very critical. And then chapter 20 ends with verse 31, where it says that all this book was written so that you might believe. And that's how chapter 20 ends. And that's how the original John, the book of John, ends. 21 is a later chapter that was just put on top of it, which in many ways just mimics the chapter 20, okay? So the end of chapter 20 is about believing. It had nothing to do with the other story, the other module. These stories just do not have to agree with each other. So whereas Mary was not allowed to hold on to Jesus, it didn't matter that Thomas was, because these are two completely isolated stories. And one of the things I shared with you is that in the Christian Bible, the point is to always be an apologetic, to defend the Christian religion. So most importantly is that you need to believe, even if you don't see, even if you don't touch, as Thomas did, you should believe. And all this was written so you might believe. And it doesn't matter whether it's not consistent with the first half of John chapter 20. I was watching an interview with Jerry Seinfeld, who's the main character of a very popular American sitcom. And the interviewer asked him, these stories that come up, they didn't make sense. The stories just were so convoluted. It's not they seemed improbable, they just were just completely out. You had to completely suspend any, like, what's happening in the story because you just want to enjoy the humor. And that's exactly what Jerry said. Jerry said that, in fact, they didn't care when writing the script, and he was a co-writer on the sitcom. He said, we didn't care if it made sense or not. It wasn't relevant to us. There was only one criteria, and that is it had to be funny. So in every module in the Gospels, the only point is not that they were consistent, where one story was consistent with another story, where Matthew 28 is consistent with John, or that John, the first part of John, is consistent with the second part of John. But what's happening is you have a development. You talked about the ascension. So you have the mentioning of the ascension in John, but actually the actual ascension and when that takes place is only implied in John, as in Matthew and Mark. It's clearly in Luke and Acts. So all of their reference, when exactly that happens, is unclear. But what is very important is in the earlier stage, Jesus saying that he is subordinate to the Father. In fact, Mary's father is his father. But after the ascension, he is elevated to the status of some element of deity, where Doubting Thomas says, my Lord, my God. Now, what is meant in the book of John is not that Jesus is the equivalent of God, but he's already my Lord, which means he's elevated in status. So that's significant, that's happening there. But that they don't agree, it doesn't matter if they agree. It's not important if they agree. The important thing is that each one delivers the punch. And the punch, of course, is, this is why the New Testament works so well on a personal level. Has someone ever not believed you, not trusted you? Yeah. And you were telling the truth, and people didn't believe you? Yeah, so people can relate to this story. Like, do I really have to prove, who I am? So people then, read the end of John and go, I don't want to be like Thomas. I want to be the blessed person who believes. And you could be sure that's the intent of this last segment of John 20, that all this was written, this whole gospel was written, so that you might believe. So you might believe what? That Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and by believing him, you'll have everlasting life. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Luke 1:6 doesn't agree with, Paul. It doesn't matter. No one cares. The point is each piece, each segment is designed to deliver a different bite. That's a really great question. Thank you. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא עובד